Ohio. Yes.
543 no's.
This episode of the Sloopcast is brought to you by the Mad Canadian Barbecue Company. Mad Canadian Barbecue Company is an Ohio-based company where they usually say our seasoning will take your barbecue from good to great. Some good news from the Mad Canadian himself. The Old Fashioned is back in stock. Be sure to check out all the great seasonings such as the Old Fashioned, which is a very interesting spice. It has kind of like a sweet bourbony taste to it with a little kick of bitter in it. Be sure to get it while it's back in stock at the
Hurry.
Mad Canadian.
You never know.
At the madcanadianbbq.com. Some other favorites here. I'm going to go off of the rib rubs that he recommends. Just mentioned the Old Fashioned. This core, which is a kind of a knockoff, not really knockoff, but similar to like the Four Horsemen, which is a very spicy blend. The Coffee and Q, one of Jared's favorites, we've mentioned a number of times, and the Two Border, which is a maple sweet flavor seasoning with a little bit of red pepper flakes in it. Very good to put in like a breakfast meal. Be sure to check out all of these at themadcanadianbbq.com. Be sure to use the promo code SloopCast10, SloopCast10 at checkout for 10% off. Mad Canadian Barbecue Company, where they have your butt covered.
This is where the music goes. YouTubers don't get the music. Sorry, YouTubers. Blame YouTube. We've got barbecue back here. You're all invited. Welcome to the Sloopcast. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm feeling pretty good. How are you, Jared?
I'm doing all right. Mad Canadian's in the Discord listening live, and he wants you to know that you nailed it.
Awesome. I know I screwed it up 2 weeks in a row, but it's good to nail it there.
There you go.
I'm gonna blame it on the alcohol here. A little liquid courage.
Yeah, me too. Although we normally do this much earlier on a Sunday. So are you blaming the fact that you got it correct on the liquid courage? Because the last 2 times when you messed it up, we recorded at like 10 in the morning and you were stone sober. At least I assume you were stone sober.
Sure. Sure.
Busted. Kyle's an alcoholic.
All right, let's get into it here. We got a few things to talk about in today's episode. We got a surprise commit for the Ohio State 2022 class. Then we'll go ahead and break down a little bit of the 20.
We'll get into it. We'll get into it.
Update on the 21 and the 2022 class. Some updates on the ACC and SEC announcements this past week. And answering your Ask Sloopcast questions. Does that sound good, Jared?
That sounds great. Here's where I don't know. I'm still a little stuck. I'm still a little stuck on one thing that you called it a surprise announcement. I'm a little stuck on that. What's that?
Weather?
You broke up again. Sorry, this is Discord's fault. It's not your fault.
The weather?
Oh, no. We aren't talking about the weather. No, it's just, he's the number 1 player in the state of Ohio. He's been number 2 on my most likely to commit list in the 2022 class. And then you're calling him a surprise commitment?
Well, I guess surprise in terms of when? Like right now, the announcement, but either way, let's beating around the bush here. Over last week, we had Ohio State had a commit from 2022 4-star outside linebacker Gabe Powers from Marysville, Ohio. Currently in the early recruiting cycle for the 2022 class. He is ranked 45th in the 24/7 sports composite. Second best outside linebacker in the country. Number 1 in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, Gabe Powers, huge pickup for Ohio State. Great inside or outside linebacker. He's currently an outside linebacker, as Kyle said. Seeing as how he's pretty young, he would, at least under normal circumstances, have 2 full seasons ahead of him in high school yet. COVID, yada, yada, yada. Who knows how much actual football that is. But for the sake of, he's only, I guess, a rising junior, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So a lot of people think he might grow into more of an inside linebacker. Your inside linebackers are typically a little bit bigger than your outside linebackers. So a lot of people think he might grow into an inside linebacker, but a linebacker nonetheless. As I stated before.
Let me ask you.
No, go right ahead.
Let me ask you this, though. Looking at his size here, 6'4", 220.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely inside linebacker size, but potentially maybe defensive end? What do you think?
I mean, who knows, how big does he, is 6'4", is that how tall he is, period? Who knows? Rising junior could very well be done growing, might not be. Right now they're looking at him as a linebacker. That's the plan. That's the idea. That's how they're recruiting him. He's a linebacker. But, who knows? Guys change positions all the time once they get into college. I mean,
I have
Simon, not Simon. I'm going to blank on his name. He's the defensive. I wanted to say John Simon for whatever reason, but that's not right. He's now the defensive end for the Bengals. Yeah, I'm totally blanking on his name. Can you help? Any help, Mad Canadian? Any help in the Discord? I'm totally blanking on his name. But he started off as... Sorry, what?
I'm drawing a complete blank on it too.
Point is that he came in as a safety, got moved to linebacker, and ends up being an elite defensive end at Ohio State. So who knows? Sam Hubbard. Thank you. I wasn't even close. But yeah, Sam Hubbard, like I said, you never know. Juju Smith was recruited into USC as a safety. And now he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Like, you don't know. But point is that right now Ohio State sees him as a linebacker.
Yeah. Well, I've never seen this for a Ohio State commit here. One of the crystal ball predictions had a 10 for him to pick Ohio State.
So maybe now you see why I'm pushing back on you calling it a surprise commitment.
Surprise again.
I know. I'm just giving you crap.
Whatever. Definitely a good early get for Ohio State, even if it was a lock or not a surprise if you're a Jared here.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the 2021 and the 2022 class here.
Sure. I would say not a ton of updates as far as the 2021 class goes. Tristan Lee, no real updates there. I think Ohio State's in second place still. USC still has LSU still has a pretty big lead for Tristan Lee. Derek Davis Jr., I think I heard or read somewhere, he's probably looking to commit sometime in September, but I still, I see that as a 50-50 shot still, despite the crystal balls and a lot of the public opinion pushing him to Penn State. I don't know. I see that there are people who I really respect who are saying Penn State. And there are people who I really respect who are saying Ohio State. So I know Givler and Berm, I think, are just saying it's a 50-50 proposition right now. And those are two of maybe the 4 or 5 people who I trust the most, whose opinions I trust the most. And, they're saying it's very possible. So I'm still working on that. I haven't changed. Lee is still 6. Davis is still 5. I still think Ohio State, again, probably has like a 50-50 proposition with Jagger Burton. Slightly better than that with Tywin Malone. No updates on JTT from last week's episode. I said he's slipping a bit, but nothing has changed as far as my opinion on last week's episode. And Emeka Egbuka, we're just waiting. We're just waiting for that to happen. Yeah. Don't believe any smoke about Oklahoma or USC or Clemson or this or that. It's Emeka Egbuka's going to come to Ohio State. He just hasn't announced it yet. It's fine.
So kind of an update on the 2021 here, class.
Sure.
We mentioned a little bit about last week here. Alabama is still surging up. They are 35 points behind Ohio State. I think when we really dug into this, Ohio State was like 40-plus points ahead of anybody else. But now here we are, Alabama surging ahead.
Not ahead.
Alabama has the same amount of 5 stars as Ohio State does right now. They have 4 5 stars right now. They have 16 total commits. Have a total of 280.75 points to Ohio State's 305.5.
It's a lot. The more points you get, the harder it is to accumulate more points. So that's one thing. Not all points are created equal. The other thing to keep in mind is that, like I said, Emeka Egbuka, that's another 5-star player who's practically in the pocket right now. That's a 66% chance. Or 66. 99 is what I meant to say. A 99% chance Emeka Egbuka's coming to Ohio State. Top 10 player in the entire class. 5-star player. JTT, another 5-star player. Is still incredibly likely to come to Ohio State. It's still Ohio State over the field. Is Oregon a player? Yes, Oregon's a player, but it's still 75-80% likely that JTT comes to Columbus. So,
I mean, you look at JTT and Emeka, 2 top 7 there. So if Ohio State is fortunate enough to get both of those commits, 3 players in the top 7 going to Ohio State, that is ridiculous.
I don't know if it's completely unprecedented or not, but it's darn close.
Mm-hmm. With those 2 added onto Ohio State, there's no way that Alabama would be able to catch Ohio State.
No. I almost... it's real close that Emeka would seal it up for Ohio State.
Yeah. Ohio State right now has an average, is just a tad under 95 right now, and then Alabama is just a tad under 94.5. So Ohio State still has a pretty comfortable average per recruit too.
Yeah. Mad Canadian who's listening in asks, "What if it's just one?" If it's just one, it's almost certain. I mean, that's why I'm not worried about Ohio State's going to win unless there's decommitments that we're not anticipating right now, and I'm not anticipating any decommitments right now. Unless there are some decommitments that I'm completely going to be blindsided by, Ohio State's going to get this number 1 overall class. Emeka Egbuka will sign eventually. He will commit eventually. And that almost seals it up for Ohio State. And that's just Egbuka. That's not even considering what if JTT also commits, which, like I said, he's far more likely to do than not do. That doesn't take into consider Tywin Malone, who Ohio State is still favored over the field, and he's just outside the top 50. Mm-hmm. Ohio State is still in the running, and when I say in the running, I mean just this close. I mean, like, highly favored. Ohio State is highly favored for 3 players who are basically in the top 50. Malone's at 53. So you add Emeka plus Tywin Malone. That's game over as far as winning the class. And that doesn't even take into account Tristan Lee, who Ohio State's in very good position for, but behind. That doesn't take into account Derek Davis Jr., who is just 1 spot ahead of Tywin Malone. But, like I said, that's 50-50 at best. That doesn't take into account Jagger Burton, who is, I'm just, 10-4, thanks for the clarification, says TMC. I'm just enjoying hearing myself talk right now, TMC. It doesn't even take into consideration Jagger Burton, who is just outside the top 100 at 118, who Ohio State is 50-50 more for.
So I think if Ohio State gets, even if they just get the one, either JTT or Emeka, and they get a couple of other people too, I think if they get above, I think the number mark is 315. I think if they get over 315 or the points over at 24/7 Sports, they'll lock this recruiting class. If you look at the past few recruiting seasons here.
What was Georgia's a couple years ago? Because Georgia, it was the class where they got Justin Fields.
So that's the one exception, and I'll get to here. So 2015, Alabama had 311, USC had 310. In 2016, it was 302, 295, so a little bit lower. 2017 is when Alabama had that ridiculous class. They had 29 commits, or 18 of those, 18 4-stars and 6 5-stars. That was that really ridiculous class. Had just under 324 for that class. 2018, which is the one you were thinking of with Georgia, they had 323, but Ohio State had 317.
And then if you move Justin Fields over, which is what happened.
Ohio State has the number one then, essentially. 2019, Alabama had 317, Georgia's 309, and last year 313, 310, Georgia and Alabama, which is like looking at these numbers here, it is just ridiculous. And I think everybody knows this already. Just seeing the numbers here is just how underperforming Georgia really is.
Well, that class fell apart in a bunch of ways, not just Justin Fields, but that's you see. Austin has joined the chat, at least for a moment. Justin Fields was the number 1 player for Georgia in that class. And he was the number 2 overall player in the entire year that year. And you take that player away, and that hurts the class terribly right there. And then, like I said, I know that they lost Brenton Cox, who they flipped from Ohio State. I wonder if Ohio State had held on to Cox, if they would have had the number 1 overall class, even before we consider Justin Fields. And then Brenton Cox is in Florida now. So committed to Ohio State, flipped to Georgia, and has now transferred to Florida.
Well, it's not so much just like one recruiting class, which they had that ridiculous one where they had the number 1 recruiting class in 2018. You see it in the past 5 or 6 years. They were top 3 in almost all of them, minus one year where they were like 5th or whatever, though. it's not just one class. They've been pretty consistent in the recruiting trail.
Yeah.
They just come up short every year, though. We use the
You're
term
in a conference with
years
Bama
ago.
is kind of what it boils down to.
It does too, but in a way too, there's been some years too where are they the new Clemsoning, essentially. I know Clemson's not Clemsoning anymore, but are they the new Clemsoning?
Yeah, I mean, you could say the same thing about USC, who you mentioned had the number 2 overall class with an incredibly high score a few years ago. And, they obviously did nothing with that. So,
So before we jump to the 2022 class, speaking of Clemson, Clemson's really jumped up too. They've had a couple of commits this last week. They added 2 new 4-stars to the recruiting class, jump up from 6th to 3rd right now. So looking at the top 3, no surprise, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson.
yeah, like I said, a few months ago, everyone was like, oh, Bama's recruiting dynasty is over. No, just give it time. Clemson lost a couple players, a couple significant players. The number 1 overall player who's still uncommitted, potentially on his way to USC. The other one's Jordan Hancock, who is now committed to Ohio State. And they fell in the rankings a bit. That and just other teams started performing and passed them. And everyone's like, oh, what about Clemson? Clemson's fine. Don't worry about Clemson. Don't worry about Ohio State. Don't worry about Bama. It's fine. Austin asks if they had beaten, and he's talking about Georgia, beaten Bama when Tua saved them, would the narrative be different? The narrative would be different, would it not? Yeah, of course it is. You're either a national championship, yes. You're either a national champion or you're not.
It's the same thing with Ohio State back in 2014. The narrative would have been so much different if Ohio State didn't win a national championship that year. They lost to Alabama. Everybody would just be maybe not necessarily laughing at Ohio State, but not giving them as much respect.
Yeah.
Because if winning a national championship or losing to another SEC school or whatever.
But by the way,
it's just,
well, but no, they would be Georgia.
Yep.
I mean, that's what it would be. Ohio State wins the national championship in 2015. They haven't since, despite always being in the top 3 or 4 recruiting classes. Despite always being right there going to the playoffs or in the playoffs. So would the narrative be different? Yeah, absolutely. Because what would the Ohio State narrative be right now had, Cardell Jones and Ezekiel Elliott not taken over that game against Bama? If Cardell Jones wasn't up to the challenge...
Even before that game, too.
Yeah.
Or that game, too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Whether it be the Michigan game or the Wisconsin game, if Cardell Jones wasn't up to the challenge of taking over the team and winning a national title, yeah, the entire Ohio State would be like, oh yeah, you got all these recruiting classes, but you haven't won a national championship since 2002. That would be, that would be the narrative for Ohio State. It's a zero. Sports is zero sum, man. Either you're a national title holder or you're not.
All right, let's move on to the 2022 recruiting class here. With the addition of Gabe Powers, Ohio State now has 4 commits, including. You're going to have to help me here, Jared. I think it's Jair
Brown.
I got that. Yes, C.J. Hicks and Tegra.
Chabola.
Chabola.
Yeah, it's
from Westchester, Ohio.
Yeah, TSCH equals CH.
I'm looking for that vowel after the T there, but
yeah, the TSH is just a CH in the I believe Nigerian. I believe is where that is. TI double. Oh, he's making a Winnie the Pooh reference.
Yes, he is.
Okay.
So
That's what happens when you have young kids. You make Winnie the Pooh references uh, from the Mad Canadian.
All four commits for our state, all from the state of Ohio.
Sort of. That's the narrative right now. Ohio State's locking up the Ohio State border again, and Ohio State's recruiting Ohio again, and all of this. I think they're getting dang close at this point to having as many Ohio recruits. Anyway, the point is that Jair Brown was in New Orleans when he committed and transferred to Cincinnati. So I'm just pointing that out, is that he was in New Orleans and then transferred.
According to 24/7, he's currently in Westchester, Ohio.
Yeah, he's in Cincinnati now. But he, like I said, was in Louisiana when he committed.
So if I'm looking at the top Ohio prospects for the 2020 class, 2022 class, number 1, 3, 4, and 5 right now. Number 2 right now is Wagner,
offensive tackle
from Dayton. Yep, from Wayne, more precise. I have to look deeply in here. Yeah, no offers yet from Ohio State. That will probably soon change, though. But
sort of it's weird to call someone a late riser, considering we're talking about an entire recruiting class ahead of time. But he's a recent addition into the top, 5, top 10 in Ohio rankings. So maybe coming on the scene a bit late. The rankings for 2022, you can not toss them out, but take all of the 2022 rankings with a grain of salt. No camp season, evaluate, not some of these players. I mean, there's entirely possible there's some player with nothing but MAC offers right now who grew 4 inches over the summer, but just no one knows. It's the information's just not out there. There was no camp season. Right now it looks like there will be, your typical practice season in Ohio. He's probably eating Mad Canadian seasonings. That's a cheap additional ad because you're in the Discord right now, but you got it. Congratulations. It's
looking at comparing the 2 offensive tackles for 2022. Again, going into their junior year, whether or not they have football this year or not. Looking at the size of them, Chibola, 6'5", 340. It's a big boy.
Yep.
That's a big boy there. 6'5", 340. Remember that number, 340, 6'5".
Yeah.
Wagner, 6'6", 240.
Yeah.
Wagner probably needs to put on a little bit more weight to be an offensive tackle.
Yeah. It's coming.
Going into his junior year and all that.
Yes. So, like I said, and by the way, that number could be completely out of date and out of whack. Like, he might weigh 50 more pounds right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, without all of the camps and without, evaluation and the measurements, everything, 24/7 Sports, which is the primary thing we use to what's the word I'm looking for? Aggregate all of this data. Well, they aggregate the data and then we read it on the podcast. But that when we talk about someone's rankings or how tall they are, or how much they weigh, we're getting all this stuff from 24/7. But they're way behind right now, and it's not their fault. They're normally pretty golden with their measurements, but no camp season. It's just, it is what it is. These players aren't being evaluated right now. So just take it all with a grain of salt. But yeah, Ohio is locking down Ohio right now. And I really, really like the 4 kids they have in the class. I think that probably goes without saying. And I don't know, Kyle, you want to roll through? I have a top 10 list. Again, it's pretty absurd, and take this with a grain of salt, too. I have no business putting together a top 10 list because I don't think Ohio State has a real solid top 10 list at this point. But I do have a top 10 list, most likely commit to Ohio State. And I already have, on top of the 4 Ohio State players committed to this class, Ohio players from the state of Ohio, that is, committed to Ohio State, I already have 3 additional Ohio players in this top 10.
Okay.
So you want to roll through this top 10 with me?
Sure, let's do it.
Number 1, and I've had him number 1 in a while. I'm honestly a little bit surprised he hasn't committed yet. Offensive tackle Blake Miller from Strongsville, Ohio. There was a lot of thought for a while that he was just going to sort of commit almost immediately after Ohio State offered him. He didn't, but I still believe that he ends up being an Ohio State Buckeye before too long. Number 2 on the list is Deshaun McCullough. Deshaun McCullough, defensive back from Kansas. Or is it I think it's Kansas. It is Kansas. Well, he's from Kansas City, which, if could be Kansas City or Missouri. It's both. But it's he has Ohio ties. So don't let the Kansas thing throw you off too much. Dad played for the Red Hawks in Miami. Brother plays, I think still actively plays for the Red Hawks in Miami. This is an Ohio family. Dad is a coach for the Chiefs. That's why he's in Kansas City. So, Ohio kid, Ohio ties, just sort of displaced at the moment. But obviously a coach's son at a very high level. I think also probably pretty inevitable that he's an Ohio State Buckeye soon. I'm going to say soon on Deshaun McCullough.
Gotcha.
Wait, yeah.
Well, go over to one state over to Missouri. You're number 3 here. You have wide receiver Luther Burden.
Yeah, I like Luther Burden a whole lot too. It feels like the type of guy that Ohio State swoops in and grabs. Ohio State has had an incredible amount of luck getting not just players, because I believe Luther Burden's in the St. Louis area, not just getting players out of St. Louis lately, but getting wide receivers, especially out of St. Louis. And it feels like the exact type of player that A, Ohio State goes after, and B, that Ohio State gets. So it almost feels inevitable.
Gotcha. All right, number 4 you have here is defensive tackle Caden Curry from Indiana.
By far the best player in the state of Indiana right now. And sort of we were talking on last week's podcast when we were talking about basketball recruiting. We were talking a bit about how Ohio State locked down the best basketball player in the state of Ohio last week, or at least we talked about it on last week's podcast. And how important it is for Ohio State to do that in the basketball realm, because that's not a given as much as it is a given for Ohio State football. So, and we talked about how the best player in the state of Ohio oftentimes will end up playing basketball for Kentucky, playing basketball for Pitt, playing basketball for Indiana. Well, this is sort of that. Indiana's going to do everything they can to keep the best player in Indiana, but it feels like Ohio State's going to get first pick over the best player in Indiana, and I feel like this is once again what it's going to be. This is how it is, just in reverse, and there's mutual interest. Ohio State wants Caden Curry. Caden Curry wants Ohio State. I feel pretty good about this one, considering how early we are in the cycle.
Number 5 here, you have linebacker Sean Murphy from Virginia. Virginia is not a state you hear too often that Ohio State goes towards.
It's going to be more and more, I think. Going to be more and more. Ohio State has been moving their way east, thanks in large part to Maryland and Rutgers joining the Big Ten. They've had some luck in Virginia lately. They got the number one running back in the country who's out of Virginia just in this past class. Kyle, time to refresh?
What you just said. Oh, refresh my alcoholic beverage.
Sometimes I forget that they can see us too.
Yes.
Hold on. Well, if it's time for Kyle to refresh, I'll finish my beer too. Lost my train of thought. Sorry. TMC says he's going to get banned from these, knocking us off our tracks. No, it's cool. It's cool, TMC. Yeah, so Virginia, we've seen them have success in New Jersey. We've seen them have success in Maryland. It just sort of feels like Virginia's the next step in that Ohio State's going to be involved for the best players in Virginia. Because Virginia Tech's not really anything right now. Because Virginia's not really anything right now. The ACC in general is down, which is a good thing for Ohio State and Penn State and Maryland and Rutgers for sort of locking up the northern half of the coast.
Mm-hmm. Well, wasn't it this class or maybe it's next class? Ohio State has a kid from North Carolina. Yeah. Evan Pryor.
Yeah. Absolutely. Both of their running backs are out of ACC territory. One from Virginia, one from North Carolina in the 2021 class. Absolutely.
Yep.
People made fun of the Big Ten for bringing in Rutgers, for bringing in Maryland, but what they were attempting to do as a conference was to rebrand to rebrand the Big Ten as not the conference of the Midwest, but the conference of the North.
Yep.
And as you see these kids from Maryland and New Jersey and even maybe down into Virginia and North Carolina, you're starting to see more of these players from these new population zones starting to commit to Big Ten teams.
I'm all for that.
I would not be surprised to see the Tar Heels become a part of the Big Ten eventually. It makes a lot of sense from a lot of different perspectives.
I'm still upset that Ohio State and North Carolina
canceled their home and home.
They canceled that home and home. I was really looking forward to going to the football game. I know there was a basketball game last year, but trying to go to a basketball game in either UNC or Duke is near impossible. And the fact, too, that tip-off last year was at 10 o'clock. There's no way. Sorry.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure it's like, anyway. We need to stay focused. I had like two different tangents I wanted to get on. We need to stay focused.
Number 6 here. We have linebacker Justin Medlock from Texas. So we're moving to southwest now.
Yes.
Texas is a really popular state. Ohio State's really come after and got some really top prospects out of as well.
Absolutely. We're moving into a little bit less likely territory. I feel really good about the top 5 guys. Medlock is a guy that Ohio State's going to go after hard, but Medlock's also a guy that a lot of places are going to go after, with a lot of effort. So we'll keep an eye on Medlock.
Mm-hmm. And coming up at number 7. Number 7, we have defensive end Trey Bigsby from Florida. Now the question, Jerry.
Yeah.
We're at in Florida. Is this IMG?
I honestly forget. I don't have it written in the I don't have it written in our notes. But yeah, just a defensive end that is built the way Larry Johnson likes defensive ends. There's mutual interest. Yeah, Well, I'm sorry, we're running a little bit longer on this segment than I wanted to. Kyle, are you still in the chat, or did I just lose your video? Waiting on Kyle. We lost Kyle.
I'm here.
There he is. Is your video connecting? I still just have me on video. There you are.
I'm here.
Uh-oh. All right, there we are. Trey Bixby, again, just sort of feels like a Larry Johnson guy. There's mutual interest. William Johnson, who's a defensive back from Ohio State, coming in at 8. Nick Singleton, very talented running back from the state of Michigan. There's a lot of really good running backs. Ohio State's brought in 2 in the 2021 class, assuming everything stays the way it should. So who knows what Ohio State's plans are for the 2022 class. There's a lot of great options, both in Ohio and national guys who there is at least early on mutual interest in. So, like I said, there's a lot of potential. Did I have something wrong in the notes, Kyle?
Good. Yes, he's actually from Ohio.
Trey Bixby's from Ohio.
Trey Bixby is from St. Edward High School in Lakewood, Ohio.
I must have messed up with my copying and my pasting. William Johnson, Nick Singleton, and then a guy to keep an eye on. I don't think he's Ohio State's. In fact, I know he's not Ohio State's first option. I know that Kyle continues to I mess up with my copies and my paste, huh? Where's Nick Singleton from? Did I mess that one up too?
I'm looking for you, buddy.
Okay. I know Drew Allar's from Ohio. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah.
Singleton's from
is
PA.
from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yes.
I now see how I messed that copy and paste up. It was just sort of shifted. Anyway, Drew Allar, I think he's not Ohio State's first option at quarterback. Their first option at quarterback is Quinn Evers, but Quinn Evers is everyone's first option at quarterback right now. That's just going to be difficult. He just sort of feels like a guy who's going to go to Oklahoma. An Ohio quarterback who I really like. We'll see how this season goes, if there is a season, and how he performs on that. But Drew Allar is a guy who I want to definitely keep an eye on, and whose name I want to mention, sort of bringing in at the bottom of this list. He's from Medina, Ohio. All right, Kyle. I think that's it as far as talking about the 2022 class. Had to sort of zip through those last few. But that's okay. Just we're running a little over on time. So, Kyle, let's do an ad read. Let's revisit our good friend the Mad Canadian, and then we'll do some Ask Sloopcast questions. How does that sound?
Sounds good. One thing that a lot of people don't really think about when they think of barbecue seasonings is a really neat thing about what the Mad Canadian has with his seasonings is that not only is it good on your chickens, your beefs, your porks, your ribs, it's also good on your vegetables too. Some of the things that he put on here that be really good on some of your vegetables you may grill, you may steam them in some foil, or if you're like Jared, you may put them in the air fryer. But for us normal people, we would put them into the grill. Some of the seasonings that he recommends here, the Mad Hatter, the Ope, Savory Brits Blend, Sonoran Heat, the Smoked, or the S&P Bud. S&P Bud is always just a great seasoning just to put on anything.
Yeah, your S&P Bud and your Sonoran Heat, I feel like are some great do-all seasonings. The Smoked as well, I feel like if you I'm not sure what to put on this one, just reach for the S&P Bud and you'll be fine. He wants us to know that the Old Fashioned makes great sautéed apples. Kyle, have you ever sautéed an apple?
The only time I ever did any kind of seasoning on apples is just like cinnamon.
Yeah, but he's talking about a sautéed apple. You ever sautéed
No,
an apple?
I haven't.
I don't.
I have not. No.
I don't think I've ever cooked an apple. I'm not a baker. I
Well,
know a lot of
I
people
mean,
bake apple pies. He says, "Oh
I
my
know, I know
God,
my
lost
my
everything." Not sure what
my,
that
my
is.
mother has sautéed apple with cinnamon, but never. I personally never have though.
Okay,
I'll take the Mad Cadian's word for it. Old fashioned, according to him, works fantastic to put onto sautéed apples.
there you go. I mean, I know I've personally like made cocktails with apple slices in them before, so it makes and bourbon based. I should point out bourbon based cocktails with apple slices. So it makes perfect sense to me.
Hmm.
If you like bourbon, you'll like the old fashioned because it's bourbon and it's cherry. How can you go wrong with that?
Yes. Be sure to check out all the great seasonings over at the madcanadianbbq.com. That is the madcanadianbbq.com. Be sure to use the promo code SLOOPCAST10 for 10% off the entire order.
I
Mad
think
Canadian Barbecue Company, where they have your butt covered.
I think when he said that he lost everything, I think he just sort of lost communication with us because he hopped out of the room and hopped back in. I was trying to decipher what that meant.
All right. See, it's user error.
It's always user error with TMC.
All right. All right. Let's get into the last tidbits here that we have here. ACC and the SEC came out with their schedule announcements here. To no surprise, the ACC doing a 10-game conference just like the Big Ten, but they added in one additional out-of-conference, which I thought was a little different.
We're all pretending Notre Dame's in the ACC this year, apparently.
Well, no, they're including the part of the 10-game conference is Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Dude. So they're also, for this year only, which I imagine probably is going to change, and I think the writing's on the wall here, Notre Dame is eligible for the ACC championship. But you know what? This is just going to be leverage for them to join the conference in the future here, because I think they.
You were using common sense.
It would be dumb for Notre Dame to not try to join the ACC after this.
You're using common sense, which is a dangerous thing when talking about Notre Dame. This is a desperate times, desperate measures maneuver. Once Notre Dame is not desperate and they have options, they will just choose to be independent because that's Notre Dame and that's what they do. All right, Kyle. ACC, SEC, Big 12, or not, excuse me, not the Big 12, have announced not their schedules, but their scheduling formats. Big 12 has not done that yet. The Big 10 has not done that yet. It's at least not at time of press. At the time of recording, they have not done that yet. It does not matter to me, in all honesty, because any schedule right now is just written in pencil.
Mm-hmm. The interesting thing with the SEC, they're doing the same formula as the Big Ten, doing a 10-game conference only, but they're starting week 4. We're going to start on September 26th. So that doesn't give them a lot of leeway room. They said that gives them 2 weeks of options to kind of mess around with their scheduling.
Yeah, I would assume you'd start as early as possible, and then if stuff happens...
Start as early as week 0. Start as early as week 0.
Which I think is what some, it's all written in pencil. It doesn't matter. They're gonna do all this stuff, and games are gonna get canceled, and games are gonna get moved. This is why all of the conferences are doing insulated conference schedules to allow for maneuvering of the schedules. It doesn't matter. none of this matters because they're just going to reshuffle it later, and games are going to get canceled, games are going to get moved. Everyone's like, can't wait for the Big Ten schedule. I don't care. I don't care because it's just a suggestion right now.
Yep.
All right, Kyle, you want to do some Ask Sloopcast?
Yes, sir. Let's get to it here.
All right. Let's see. Jared the Buckeye gives us a trio of questions here. Let's hit these up real quick.
You sure this isn't you? This is your second account here?
This is not my second account. Is Jared Ohio at Jared Ohio on Twitter, and I never use it. So you guys can follow it if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. All right. Jared the Buckeye says over under 5.5 Red Bulls a day for Kerry Combs.
First looking at that, I would love to say over. Mm-hmm. Kerry Coombs seems more of like a coffee person to me.
He is a coffee person. So if we're talking about 5.5 caffeine drinks, it's over. But if we're talking specifically Red Bulls, it's under.
Yes.
Kyle's ashamed because he mispronounced his name again, aren't you?
Yes.
All right, second one from Jared the Buckeye. Should there be a changing of the guard at linebacker? I know Tough gets all sorts of... hate, but with the talent at the linebacker from the 2018 class, is it time to have better talent in there? I think you're making an assumption that Tough isn't the better talent. And I don't necessarily think that's a correct assumption. And by the way, it's not always talent.
No, it's got to be on the scheming too, depending on the type of offense that it's going to play. And we talked about in a couple of the episodes during the fall, is that Tough wouldn't be in a lot of the plays when it's a passing scenario where you're going to have Pete Warner in there where he's able to drop back into coverage a lot better than Tough Borland would too. So I think it would be the same case here too. Tough would be in a lot of the plays, but anytime it's a passing situation or it's a team that tends to pass a lot more, like Indiana, essentially, who loves to pass, do a lot more passing plays, though. We wouldn't see Tough in as many of those plays.
Yeah, it's situational, and that's fine. It's okay to have Tough Borland in there on first and second downs and to put someone with a bit more speed in on third downs. That's fine. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with that. And there is something to be said about rewarding leadership and rewarding practice players. Because, some people, you have to put the most talented guy on the field. Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. Because if the most talented guy on the field slacks off in practice and you still start him despite the fact he slacks off in practice, you create a culture where participating in, and I'm talking in generalities now, I'm not talking about anyone in particular, you create a culture where practicing doesn't matter, as opposed to practice as a competition. And, it's not necessarily always about playing the most talented guy, because you also have to know the scheme. You have to know it comes down to more than simply physical talent, which Tough isn't the most physically talented guy. But there's amazing knowledge there, experience, leadership, and all of those things do matter. But he's also not nearly as athletically hampered as many of you make him sound to be.
Yeah. It almost sounded Trussell-like there for a moment.
But Urban did the same thing.
To a degree, yeah.
Not to a degree. He absolutely did the same thing.
All right.
Look at the wide receiver spot throughout the few years, where we know that less talented wide receivers stayed on the field more because of what they contributed to the football team. You could make the argument that that was J.T. Barrett. You know what I mean?
One last question from Jared the Buckeye. The Buckeyes pull off the number one class in both the 2021 and the 2022 class. Do you believe there will be multiple national championships in the next 5 years?
All right, so first we have if, and we already talked in length that we believe they will have the number one class in 2021. We've established that we believe that. 2022, and Jared's not asking us to predict that that's what's going to happen. He is simply saying, okay, for the sake of this scenario, it happens. It's hard to say multiple because it comes down so much to quarterback. College football is a quarterback's game. You know, you want to talk about, you want to revisit what we were talking about with Georgia earlier in the podcast? What if, let's play the what if scenario. What if what if Georgia had benched Fromm, much like Clemson did, and brought in their freshman quarterback who was better? Mm-hmm. Where is Georgia now under Fields?
Yeah. It's just going to come, we'll find out next year too, whoever Ohio State's quarterback is going to be and how well they perform, though. I 100% agree with Jared. It is a quarterback-driven sport.
Yeah.
And it depends so much on the quarterback. Even in years where Ohio State didn't have a great quarterback, look at this picture right behind me, Jared. This quarterback right here. He wasn't the best quarterback. He's
Craig
not
Krenzel, for everyone who doesn't. Your camera's not that great, Kyle. It's Craig Krenzel. Please continue.
Wasn't known as a great quarterback in Ohio State lore, but you know what? He was a great leader, and he made plays when he had to do that.
But also, that was 2002.
Yes,
and
almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's a different game. We are not taught. You know, college football's changed a lot. You did not need to have, I don't know if you win a national championship with either Ken Dorsey or Craig Krenzel now.
Yeah.
Now, what saves both of those teams is how amazing their defenses were.
Oh, yeah, defenses were amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I don't know if you won a national championship in 2020 with Dorsey or Krenzel.
All right, so the original question, do we believe there will be multiple national championships?
It's impossible. It's just impossible. It just so here's your scenario. You get CJ Stroud, and let's just say it's CJ Stroud wins the job next year. And then Jack Miller transfers because he loses the job. This is a highly possible thing. CJ Stroud then gets hurt. And then what do? You know what I mean? And,
Jared's beating around the bush. I'm going to actually answer the question. From what we saw last year under first year of Coach Day.
Yeah.
And what we've seen of him in his offense here, not so much the quarterback read type of offense. This is a more spread the load out type of offense compared to what Urban Meyer did. I believe so, yes. And a couple of things here. One, I think the offense is a lot more stable. Again, probably a lot of it is because you have this stud of a quarterback.
Can I sub out stable with dynamic?
And dynamic, yep.
Well, Urban's offense was incredibly stable, maybe too stable.
Here's the other thing, too. How much longer does Saban stay at Alabama, too?
True, but, I think Clemson is the lead dog right now and not Bama. But yeah,
True.
getting rid of Saban at Bama certainly helps. That's, of course, it helps. So
Possibly. Yeah.
it's,
So
to
having
ever
multiple
predict.
championships.
Look at Clemson right now. I mean, that was one of the best. You had 3 of the best college football teams ever in the playoff last year. There's never been a better collection of playoff, and that sounds weird to say because the playoffs aren't that old. But even if you retroactively created playoffs going backwards throughout the last 20 years, was there ever a better collection of 3 teams?
There's been a number of
That LSU team, that Clemson
college
team,
playoff
that
football,
Ohio
2
State team.
teams. Yeah, there's been a great number of like 2 teams in a playoff year, but I can't really think of like 3. Could have been the very first year, but
No.
Oregon in that national championship game just did not show up other than that first drive.
Yeah, they're a Pac-12 team. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I just
all right. We need to move
forward.
on here to the next question here. Suncard19 asks us, what state outside of Ohio is the most important for the Bucks to recruit? That is a really interesting question because of the number of states Ohio State does go after. Florida and Texas are 2 of the big ones. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier in today's episode, New Jersey and Maryland have also been key states Ohio State's gone after
Virginia.
the past number of years too. Virginia recently too. So what is the most important state? To me, I think it's as much as talent Ohio State has gotten out of Texas, and even of those recruits who've become first round picks, I think it's got to still be Florida. I mean, you got both Bosas out of Florida there, and a number of other athletes too from Florida. So I think it's got to be Florida for Ohio State.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think Texas deserves to be in that conversation. I think Virginia is a state we now have to look at as a part of that conversation. Georgia was that state a few years ago, but with Georgia so high and Clemson, who's right there on the border of Georgia, it's going to be really, really hard to get elite players out of Georgia right now with those teams recruiting the way they're recruiting right now. So a few years ago, I would have said Georgia, but probably not, because that seems very overly difficult right now.
And you got the other SEC schools right there on the border. You have Florida, Alabama, LSU, Auburn, and all them just right there too.
Yeah, I think the correct answer that's maybe not as obvious as Texas and Florida. I mean, Texas and Florida, that's going to be the correct answer from now forever, or it's going to be in the conversation of the correct answer from now until forever. More immediately, I think Virginia is an important state, as well as Maryland, but I'm going to say Virginia for right now to keep an eye on, because it's just sort of Ohio State, not just cherry picking out of a state, but almost like increasing their borders. It feels a little bit more significant than simply cherry picking if you can start to make severe inroads into the state of Virginia.
Yep. All right, we've got a pair of questions from our good friend, the Mad Canadian. First question he asks us, do you think we'll see more or less movement from Justin Fields in terms of design runs because of our running back core this year?
Less.
If you watch the Dream Team from the Buckeye Scoop on YouTube, there's a lot more running for Justin Fields, but it's a video game.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make a joke, but I honestly think there's going to be less.
Yeah.
Ohio State's going to be rotating those running backs a lot more. I just saw that Trey Sermon has his number picked out now.
Yeah.
He's number 4.
No,
number
we
4?
thought it was going. Yes. He was number 4 before. He's going to be 8, I believe, is what the number is. Now, But anyway, I mocked up a Photoshop to use as a touchdown card for his old Oklahoma number, and now that I've wasted all that time because he's not going to do that now. But that's okay. They'll be running back by committee. Now, if you're talking about designed runs, which is what you said in the question, there will be much less. Much, much less. Now, he might end up having more runs overall this year because I think this is going to be a pass-first offense. Last year, the offense started with J.K. Dobbins. This year, it will start with Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Justin Fields had superior numbers. Justin Fields was a Heisman finalist, so to say. But schematically speaking, not necessarily statistically speaking, but schematically speaking, it was J.K. Dobbins first, Justin Fields second. This year, with the depth and talent at wide receiver right now, with Justin Fields now in his second year in the offense, you ain't seen nothing yet as far as Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's not forget about Master Teague, too. Master Teague, minus the last game or two.
Crawley as well. I think we're going to see a deep running back rotation this year.
I completely agree. Yes. Let's not forget about those two for Ohio State in the running back core. Absolutely. The other question our good friend Mad Canadian asks us, if the Big Ten has a season, there are no bowl games or championships, what is the likelihood of a Fields 3 season at The Ohio State University? Zero chance.
Doesn't. No.
This is his second and last season at Ohio State, period.
Yeah. Yeah. There's under no circumstances, spring seasons, injury, success or lack thereof this season, a complete cancellation of this season, whatever the scenario is, Justin Fields is going to be drafted by an NFL team next year, period.
If there is a season this year and he does just as good as he did last year, even relatively good as he did last year, solid first round pick.
Yeah, it'll be, I mean, depends upon who needs quarterbacks and blah, blah, blah. But if we're talking more from a big board perspective, it's him and Lawrence. Lawrence might be like 1A and Fields is 1B. So maybe a slight edge to Lawrence, but he'll be the second, no worse than the second quarterback off the board in next year's draft.
All right, what do we got here?
Suncard asks, what is the ideal, acceptable, and terrible scenarios for the schedule of the Michigan game in 2022? So the terrible scenario is that it doesn't happen.
Yes, that is the terrible. Ideal, they see them once a year. It's like we do in the end of November.
I would say that's acceptable.
That's ideal for me. Acceptable would be seeing them twice a year, seeing them at the end of the year, then a week later at the conference championship game.
Listen, we might be looking at a really stupid season. You might be looking at a season with no postseason. We might be looking at a season with no playoff and no bowl games and no Big Ten championship. We don't know what this season's going to be. Let's just create meaning. Let's create some meaning by playing Michigan as many times as necessary or possible.
And I like what you brought up either last week or a couple weeks ago.
It was a few
weeks. Let's play them more so we can catch up.
Thank you. I don't have it in front of me, but I think Ohio State is 7 games behind in the all-time series. It's something like that.
That's how
It's something like 7 games behind. Let's do it. Let's get it all done this year. Let's get it done. I don't care. Again,
It is 7. Yep, it is 7.
Ohio State is 7 games behind.
So let's play him 8 times this
Yes!
year. Beat them all 8 times.
Yes! We might not, this might just be one big exhibition season with no national champion, with no Big Ten champion, not on the field anyway for those two things, not a thing that's actually settled but with a football game. Let's add some meaning to what might end up being a stupid exhibition of a season by going after that Michigan-Ohio State all-time record. So ideal more. Whatever more is all I'm going to say for terrible, it doesn't happen. Acceptable is once. Ideal, more. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not even going to put a number on it. I'm just going to say more.
All right. More questions from Duncan from the Discord.
Duncan from the Discord.
Is the cancellation of a Red Box Bowl really a COVID issue, or can we all be honest that it's probably because I can't remember the last time I saw a red box?
I saw a red box at Kroger. I see red
I
boxes.
see red boxes from time to time, but I haven't rented from one in a long time.
No. Lord, no.
What did we call that last year? What did we call that last December?
Oh, we called it the Netflix Bowl.
Yes, the Netflix Bowl.
If we have any new listeners, we may have called it the Blockbuster Bowl, actually.
No, yes, you are right. It is the Blockbuster.
We refused to use sponsor names, so... He said, TMC says, well, you two RIT guys. I don't remember the last time I watched a physical copy of a movie. I could not tell you the last time I popped the DVD in and watched it.
Yeah.
I could not tell you.
Me, it would probably be the Lord of the Rings.
or Blu-ray. I'm talking any physical media. TMC, Blu-ray, DVD, whatever. I don't remember the last time I've done anything like that. It's if you're a new listener to the Sloopcast, we always use a we never use the sponsor name, and we normally sub it out for a different sponsor name. It's just a joke we do during the bowl season. We have a lot of fun with it. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, it's don't start TMC with your trash beer takes. You're just starting to start something when we're already like 12 minutes over.
I'm going to save that for next episode. All right, one last question from Duncan. Last question from Duncan. Free B deck tickets or stay home?
B deck tickets are not created equal.
Yes, B deck tickets could be just as good as A deck.
One of the best seats, and I'm going to underline the word seats because it's a game in which I actually sat down. Because the most fun I've ever had at Ohio State games were in the quote-unquote open end in the student section. But you're not sitting, and you don't really even have seats because even though you have a seat on the ticket, that's all general admission over there. Seat assignments in the student section are a suggestion at best. But one of the best actual seats I've ever had was, it was basically like right in the middle, 50, in between the 40s, B deck row 1. Because you have that concrete barrier right in front of you. So I put my drink on it, put my nacho. I basically had a table in front of me. And was it the Indiana game, the year Ohio State won the national title, and so it would have been 2014. My memory sucks, but I want to say towards the end of that game, it started like snowing, and I mean like that wet, gross snow. So to have that little bit of an awning was pretty great. you have sea over top of you. Why am I a child? Why am I a child, TMC? To have that little bit of an awning above, that's fantastic.
I don't know what you're talking about, but okay.
It's when you're in B deck, C is over your head. So if there's
I know that, but all right.
It's nice to be younger than someone, TMC.
Interesting conversation I had. I know we're running really long on time here, but interesting conversation I had with a colleague though who lives in the state of Alabama. Suggestion that I said if there's any kind of recommendations in terms of who can be in stadiums, just say, because Ohio State came out and said that they could only have a maximum of 20% or 21,000 fans in the stadium.
Right.
Why not make it just the band and the students and have them all spread out across the A deck then? They're all spread out, so they're not all on top of each other. They're just all covered in the bottom. That way you can get the TV view and you see fans in those first few rows there.
You want to know the answer to that question? Money. They're not the ones donating millions of dollars to the university. That's why. Second, you don't necessarily want all students in there because you know who's going to fight the rules about staying separated and staying socially distanced the most? The students. So
it's my suggestion. I know it will never happen, but
yeah,
I had it my way. That's how I would.
Also, the students don't pay as much for the tickets. No. And they don't donate like the season ticket holders donate to the university. And like I said, they're not going to respect the social distancing rules that will be in place as much as the adults will.
Yep, you're right. That's all the questions we have for today.
And that is the end
of for today's episode.
That's it for the episode. We have a new linking system. If you check the show notes, we are now like one master link. As Kyle's wearing his Zelda hat, and I use the term master link. We now have one master link. It's to a service called Campsite. You click on that, and it has all of our stuff in it. It has our Twitter accounts in it. A link to the past, link to the future. We're linking all over the place, TMC. It's an app called Campsite, and you go to one link, and it shows you all of our links. So links to Apple Podcast, links to our merch store, links to our Spotify page, links to our iHeartRadio page, links to our Twitter accounts, our Instagram account. It just has links to all of this stuff, including our Patreon page. If you want to be like Austin or TMC and listen in live and send us questions and ask for clarifications as you listen, you can go to Patreon and contribute. The lowest, you can contribute whatever you want, but to get access to the Discord, you only need to meet the first tier, which is only $3 a month. What is that, Kyle? 10 cents a day?
10 cents a day.
10 cents a day.
10 cents a day, and you can be part of a community that talks about beer and food and get some
and
seasoning suggestions from our friend, the Mad Canadian.
Yeah. Why would you not?
Just don't talk about beer with the Mad Canadian, though. He has some...
He's mostly good with his beer takes. He just has one really bad one. That's it. He just has one really bad beer take. For the most part, he drinks his Wolf's Ridge, and he drinks some... it's Ohio above all. I absolutely agree with you, TMC. Ohio above all. But it doesn't mean that Yuengling isn't also good for the price. That's all I'm saying. Yuengling is very good for the price. That's all I'm saying. Shut up, TMC. So that's it. That's the end of the show. Go to the master link, and it has links to all of our stuff, all the socials. the merch store. I'm designing a bunch of new t-shirts for the season. All the old t-shirts are still there. You can still buy them. But I'm designing a bunch of new shirts for the season. We're now on TeePublic, just because I decided they delivered a little bit better service than Teespring, who I had some issues with. And I think that's it. Kyle, do you have anything in Kyle's Corner?
Just a little update about the Columbus Crew. Fortunately, they got knocked out in the first game in the in shootouts. Though they had their chances, they could have won it, should have, but that's the way the game is. So, but I still like what I've seen from the team, though. And with the injuries that they had going into that game, though, I still like their chances the rest of the season still. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the season plays out for the Crew.
Yeah, and the new stadium will be up next year. I'm looking forward to it. I have my season ticket to the Nordecke. You guys should join me. We'll do Sloopcast meetups there's going to be a beer garden in the Nordecke. Let's do some Sloopcast meetups in the Nordecke. I'm going to be there. You should be there too. And you don't need a season ticket to get in there. You can just buy a ticket. Kyle will be there in spirit. And maybe once in real life. But yeah, come watch a soccer game with me. I'm going to be there for every home game. If you don't know, the Nordecke is like the cheer section. It's the rowdy section, where all the drums and smoke bombs and all that are. That's where you can find me. Come to a game, send me a message, we'll meet up, it'll be great.
That's all I got for today.
All right, tonight's ending music will be by a Cleveland-based band who I have a lot of love for, called the Cloud Nothings. You can check the show notes for the song title, and that's it. So, with all of that being said, you can... I messed it up, Kyle. I don't know how... I messed up the intro last week, and now I'm messing up the exit. So with all that being said... What? What'd you say?
I need help.
I
need help.
I need a lot of help. You want to do it?
Go ahead.
All right. I want to encourage everyone to drink local beer, listen to local music, and of course, support your local podcasters. Once again, this is the Cloud Nothings. And this is where the music goes. Sorry, YouTubers.
Copyrights.
YouTube's strict, yo. Would like to thank the Cloud Nothings for ending today's episode, and I would like to thank... He left the chat. He's going to miss his third ad read. Come on, TMC. I want to thank the Mad Canadian Barbecue Company for sponsoring today's episode, and he's back. He's back. He almost missed his ad read. I just knocked my headphones out of my ear, and now I can't hear myself, and it's weird. I'm gonna highlight the Brits blend. It's one of my favorites. It's a Southwest blend. They're all one of my favorites, by the way. In case you guys haven't figured that out, they're all one of my favorites. It's great in your salsa. It's great in your chili. I made like a chicken pepper stir fry thing, and I covered it in a bunch of Brits blend. It was fantastic. It was like fajitas, but it was like fajitas. It was great. Probably would have also gone great on that would have been the Mad Hatter. The lime in there would go great with anything if you're trying to do something a little Southwesty. And then, of course, the salt and then the pepper. It's red pepper. It's a chili pepper. So it's like lime. It's chili pepper. It's salt. It's fantastic. Let's see. Which one should I do next? Which one didn't we talk about before, Kyle? We talked about the S&P Bud before. I'm not talking into the microphone. That's probably bad on my end. There's the Cajun. I don't feel like we've talked about the Cajun in a long time. You guys know what Cajun is. It's Cajun. It's cuminy. It's spicy, but it's not too spicy. It's fantastic.
We don't have a crazy name on that one. It's just called the Cajun. If you like Cajun, you'll like this, because Mad Canadian doesn't put a bunch of junk in it, and the camera will not focus. There we go. Camera's back on me now. But it's paprika it's coriander it's fantastic. It's everything you want in a Cajun blend. And we already mentioned the old fashioned a few times, but Mad Canadian wanted to be sure to let you know that it is back in stock. I don't know how long it's going to be back in stock, because he sold out of it pretty quick the first time, but it's back in stock. So use the promo code Sloopcast10, that's Sloopcast10 at checkout. TMC said in the chat, Kyle looks bored during Jared's ad read, and Kyle said that's because I ran out of alcohol. And it made me laugh. Check out that and a lot more over at the MadCanadianBBQ.com. Again, if you go to the master link, there's a link to the Mad Canadian right there on that page. So hit that master link and then find the Mad Canadian in the master link. Like I said, use promo code Sloopcast10 at checkout. Get 10% off your entire order. It doesn't matter if you buy one thing or 12. You can get 10% off your entire order with Sloopcast10 at checkout. The Mad Canadian Barbecue Company, he has your butt covered.
All right.